first, though, he is one of the most loved children's characters. You may well be seeing a lot more of Winnie the Pooh. This is because the character from the classic A.A. Milne novels is now in the public domain. That means that anyone can copy, republish and remix the original text without having to pay. Well, here to unpick this is legal commentator Steve Kuncewicz. So explain what's going on first then, Steve, here.
Hi, good morning. Well, it's public domain, but it's actually only public domain in the US at the moment as opposed to the UK, because there's no one copyright law which covers the entire world. And part of copyright is the fact that your work of creativity is protected for a certain amount of time. In the case of Winnie the Pooh, that was 95 years from first publication in the US. In the UK, the system's a little bit different in that a work of creativity, in this case a book, is protected normally from 70 years after the death of the author, which means in the UK, copyright on Winnie the Pooh, the book, the characters, the dialogue, the situation, so on and so forth, lasts for about another 5 years. But it's one of many instances of really beloved characters moving into the public domain so that certain media businesses don't necessarily have the kind of monopoly over them that they think they would do. But I think a lot of people would look at the Disney interpretation of Winnie the Pooh as the most iconic, and that's protected in any number of other ways that are going to stretch on for quite some time to come. So on the one hand, it's good news for other people who want to tell Winnie the Pooh's story from the original book in a slightly different way, but it may well be that the iconic version is protected for quite some time to come.
Good grief. So this is a complicated old situation by the sounds of things. The situation in the US, I suppose, is important because in another 5 years' time, I guess that situation could exist here in the UK. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, it's a horrible lawyer's answer to give, but it's very true. These rights deals are really complicated. And Disney signed a deal with the Milne estate back in 2001 to give them rights over the characters at least until 2026. To them, this is their second most valuable character after Mickey Mouse. This delivers them, 80 billion, and has done since 1961 when Disney first got the rights to use Winnie the Pooh. So we could see different iterations of this character, just the same way as we see different versions of Cinderella, Robin Hood. There's plenty of characters that are in the public domain. But whether or not that's going to draw anybody away from what they see mainly as the sort of central version of Winnie the Pooh that Disney control, I think probably remains to be seen. But you would imagine there are filmmakers, writers, any number of other creators that are gearing up to take their own stab at this mythology.
So does this mean then that we could see the image of Winnie the Pooh, the character, the stories, opened up to abuse, effectively put in situations that... Do you know what I mean, though? Because, I mean, how bad could it get? What are the implications, I suppose, is what I'm trying to get to here.
Well, I think you could all of a sudden see some very different takes on Winnie the Pooh, or at least you could in the US. You will see the monopoly, I think, that certain creators have had over the character challenged, and you'll see other versions, other iterations of the character over the course of the next few years. So I wouldn't necessarily see it as abuse. I'd see it as opportunity, in that you will all of a sudden get to see other creative teams take a crack at this story. And ultimately, copyright is only meant to protect you for so long, and once it expires, then things do become public domain. And I'm not in a world where we've got lots and lots of different media channels through which people can consume this kind of content. It's right that at some point other people should be able to take a crack at these stories and tell their own version.
So is there any way of preventing that copyright from expiring? Is there anything? Will this just happen? Does this happen to all characters and all stories ultimately in the end?
Well, there's no way to necessarily. It's incredibly difficult to extend the duration of copyright. Certainly is in the UK. It happens sometimes in the US, in that you can see litigation to try and stop properties ending up back in the public domain. But the courts tend to be pretty reluctant to do that, because at some point these do become everybody's works. These do become everybody's properties, and other people should get the opportunity to, as I say, tell that story in their own way. It's certainly a very big cash cow for Disney. There may well be some litigation in the US to try and keep it out of the public domain, but as it stands right now, the original book, the illustrations, and also the dialogue and characters and so on can be used by other people. So I think you'll see creators take great pains to stay away from the Disney version as far as they can, while still retaining the essential elements of the character that appeared in the original book. And I think it's worth noting as well that Disney's version is probably some way away from the original book. So you may see several versions of Winnie the Pooh over the course of the next few years.
Really interesting. And I feel the need to congratulate you, by the way, Steve, on coming up with possibly the most surprising fact that I'm going to hear for a long time, that Winnie the Pooh is Disney's second most profitable character. I mean, that is an incredible stat, which I suggest you wheel out at the dinner table next Christmas.
I'll certainly try to. I think the thing with Disney is that they own so much now, Pixar, Star Wars, and all these other characters, that people forget, the public forget, how valuable some of their original characters like Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Winnie the Pooh can still be to the company, and how still resonant they are with the audience.
I suppose as well it's just the period of time that they've been around. I mean, you think about the Disney's most profitable characters, and I'm instantly thinking about those sisters from Frozen, who appear to have been everywhere for the last few years. But the fact is they've only been around for the last few years, whereas we're talking decades and decades when it comes to some of these longer-running characters. Steve, thank you. That's Steve Kuncewicz, who's a legal commentator, talking about the fact that Winnie the Pooh, in the US anyway for now, is in the public domain.